Thought Bubble Audio.
Look, up in the sky!
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Welcome to Beer with Geeks with Tim and Frank.
Who are you?
I'm Batman.
I am Iron Man.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You're a wizard, Harry.
A couple of guys with a couple of beers and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia.
Make it so, number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Named the dog Indiana.
Life finds a way.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now sit back and crack open a cold one, because it's time for Beer with Geeks.
It comes in paints?
Shaken, not stirred.
Great Scott!
I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks, where two geeks geek out with beer. I'm Tim, and with me, as always, is my pal, the Loud Frank. How are you today?
Hey, how are you today?
I'm great. That's because Frank's wearing a hat that says Loud on it, because we also were just on an amalgamation podcast where we were all wearing hats. And it looks like an amalgam came with us, and that is Justin Vactor from the Vactorverse. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent because I'm talking to my favorite geeks about Star Wars. I'm doing great.
Yeah, we're here talking about Star Wars. Vactor, of course, hosts Trust in the Force, the Star Wars podcast. Before we even talk about Star Wars, where can people find you, Vactor, if they want to listen to that?
Yeah, Trust in the Force is on YouTube. If you the hack to searching and to getting, and I found this out, you have to put at Trust in the Force, and that will pull it up. Because if you just type in Trust in the Force, then all these other things come up. But if you put at, and that's for any YouTube channel, if you're ever looking for a specific one, just put at in there. And everything else, I am at Vactorverse all over the internet.
Excellent. And so, of course, on Beer with Geeks, as we always do, we drink stuff. So we'll start with our guest. What are you drinking today?
I am almost out, but I've got a zero sugar A&W root beer, which is my favorite root beer of all time. A&W is the gold standard for root beer in my house.
You're not a Barks guy at all? Always A&W?
I'll have Barks every now and then just because it's root beer.
Sure.
I will drink any root beer, but if you put me in a room and say, all right, pick your favorite, you can only have one for the rest of your life, it's got to be A&W root beer. But yeah, I've dabbled in Mug, Barks, any kind of root beer.
Man, I haven't had Mug, and I couldn't even tell you how long. Wow. I kind of forgot that there are different types of root, like there are different companies that make different root beer. It's so funny.
Yes.
Like, that's wild. Frank, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a cider, a Citizen Cider, Wits Up. It is their dry ale style cider. It is a cider that is made with the same variety of hops, and it's very dry, and the same variety of hops that are used in a Belgian like wit ale. So it's called the Citizen Cider Wits Up. It's a very unique. I've never seen this before. I thought it was very unique. It is, of course, brewed in Vermont, and it is very fresh from orchard to can, handcrafted, all that fun stuff. I am enjoying it immensely. It's actually, it's on the dry side. I say very dry because the markings on the can indicate that it's as dry as they get. But realistically, it's still cider. It's still sweet. Like, there is still sweetness to it.
There's a dry cider, right? Though, like
dry for a cider,
right? But
still, like there is some sweetness, of course.
I love me some cider,
and I love me some sweetness. I don't know. Yeah. We're here to talk about Star Wars: The Acolyte. The newest Disney Plus Star Wars show takes place 100 years before The Phantom Menace, set during the High Republic era of Star Wars, which up until this point was books, comics, and a children's TV show called Young Jedi Adventures, which is delightful if you have young kids. I do recommend.
Yes. There's also a video game I wanted to shout out, Jedi Survivor. There's a High Republic flashback because it takes place like right around episode 4.
Oh, is the second one there's a flashback?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I played the first one. I don't know what you're talking about.
That is a really cool story. Just the basics of it real quick. A Jedi from the High Republic gets like frozen almost in carbonite, and so he is in the modern day, and he's the villain of the story.
That's cool. That's really cool. I like that. I wish I had a device that would allow me to play it. Oh well.
You know, actually, Tim, there's a great thing that my wife and I do. So my wife doesn't have patience to play a lot of games, but she will watch them as movies on YouTube. If you just type in the name of whatever story you want and or whatever video game you want as a story, like Spider-Man on PlayStation is a great one, and movie, that'll come up with like all the cutscenes, remove all the gameplay and just focus on the story. I highly recommend doing that for games because it, like I said, it saves you on time and you get the full story. You don't have to buy the game.
That's true. Really, yeah. And I like the game. Like, I'd like to play the game, but I definitely don't have time to play the game. So, or a device in which to do that. So I am going to do that for because I really liked the first game. So I will do that for the second one. Anyway, we're here to talk about the Acolyte, which I found delicious. No, Acolyte. Yeah. Yeah.
Acolyte.
Yeah. It was awesome. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. Quite a bit. I think it actually got better as it went on. I found it like a little rough to start. But it had that, in some ways, very cozy, not great dialogue thing going for it in Star Wars. Like in a lot of ways, even not well delivered dialogue, and so like it was a little stilted. But there's a lot of Star Wars that's like that, and so I kind of enjoyed it for the ride that it was. And I think that every time you thought it was going to do a thing, it was like, no, I'm not going to do that thing. I'm going to do something different. And I enjoyed that because the obvious progression of a story is easy to map out. And so if you're like, yeah, I already know where it's going, I'm kind of along for the ride, but I don't really care. But something would happen, I go, oh, I'm going to sit up in my seat a little straighter because this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is different. This is good. And I liked that pretty much the whole way through. I'm going to say let's do spoilers for the end of the season here on out, because it's going to be hard to talk about what makes it different. Let's just say after your general 1-2 sentence reviews. Vactor, you're the guest. You get to go.
Yes. So in a nutshell, I liked him. I guess I was enjoying it at the beginning, and then it hit a certain point where I was like, hey, I'm loving this. This is what I want a Star Wars show to be. And actually, I wish this is what Ahsoka had been more of. If you think about the lightsaber fights in Ahsoka, and then you think about what we got in the Acolyte, I think this is the way. And why have we not gotten wire work and martial arts before in Star Wars? It was crazy that it took this long for them to put those elements in. And I'm a big martial arts guy, so mixing those two was like chocolate and the peanut butter in Star Wars. So I loved all of the new stuff that they brought and an examination of the institution of the Jedi. That was what overall I was really digging about this show.
Frank?
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it, and I have a little bit of feedback. Here's the thing. It got all this hate online that it absolutely did not deserve. Like, completely overblown, like, just uncalled for, over the top. Don't agree with the hate that it has gotten online. Absolutely. The entire time I was like, this is a pretty good show. Give it a second. Like, just come on. Like, we just put the kettle on. Just give it a second.
Yes.
But like at the same time, there was once you got to sort of the middle of the season, I was like, all right, I'm kind of waiting for it to like sort of take off though. I'm like, I was kind of waiting for it to. There wasn't a ton of momentum, and I was sort of waiting for it. Like, all right, well, when do we when does this thing take off? When do we launch?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we got there at the end of the season.
Oh, yeah.
For me, we got there at the finale was phenomenal. And like a lot of the story along the way was great. I just feel like I was talking to our mutual friend Andrew earlier today, and I said, like, in comics, when the writer gives you a 3-issue story spread over 6 issues so that it can be a trade.
Mm-hmm.
This felt like a 4-issue story spread over 8 episodes.
Yep.
So they could make a series out of it.
Totally.
Yeah.
There felt like it was not I wouldn't say filler so much as decompression. It was very decompressed. The story could have been really tight, and I think it would have benefited from that. I also think that 8 short episodes weekly, like 34-minute episodes, whatever they were, 35-minute episodes weekly, was not the best way to deliver this show. I think if this show had been dropped in one day and everyone binged it, all the negativity online would not have happened, because people would not have been fixating on something in episode 2 they didn't like, or like what Kiadi Mundi's age should be. They would instead be focusing on like the story as a whole and what they liked about it. I think. Mm-hmm. So that's my feedback for Lucasfilm, is that like this is a really good show, and I hope it gets to season 2 because I want to see what happens next.
Well, it apparently had the highest ratings since Kenobi, which was their highest rated Star Wars show. So I don't think all
heard,
the right.
I'm glad to hear it. Like I've been seeing people saying that like the online reactions don't match up with the numbers.
Correct. I think the review bombing, that it doesn't hit the same things. It didn't like that regular people going like same thing, like cool Jedi mystery, like cool fight scenes with wire work. We haven't seen that before. Like that's it. And you don't have to have seen any other Star Wars. Literally no other Star Wars matters. Like you can just watch this story. You might be like, what are the Jedi? If that would be like the thing, but like you catch up pretty quick. So I don't think any of that.
Pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think any of that is actually an issue. Justin, I want to go back to your comment about like why haven't we gotten wire work in Star Wars before, or this. I wanted to see this fight thing. I think that this is in my headcanon thing. So like when you watch the original trilogy and you watch Luke like swing his lightsaber like a baseball bat, you're like, okay, like he doesn't know. Like there's like in story like, oh, Obi-Wan Kenobi's old and Vader's a machine, and like and he's never been trained really in lightsaber fighting and all that. So you kind of just like forgive those things. Then you go backwards to the prequels and you're like, this is the good stuff. Here they are. Look at them go. The height of the Jedi, blah blah blah. But it's not really the height of the Jedi. It's their decline. They're like kind of fat and lazy, and they've let like the government like kind of swash over them. So they're couch potato Jedi. So it's like you're watching them at an amazing point in their couch potato. So like if you get to Ahsoka, she's a little bit beyond that. She left, right? So she's great, but she doesn't have full training, and there's nothing around to like keep her going the same way. And so, those fights were great. Don't get me wrong, but I loved it. But when you get to the High Republic, this is literally their height, the High Republic, right? And so what we're watching is like stuff that's been lost in generations past. Even in that 100-year gap, some stuff just gets lost. And I think that's really that's my headcanon for it.
That makes complete sense. I think there's a lot of real world reasons behind that. Like the originals, they just weren't. They didn't know what.
Right, that's not what they did.
Yeah. They didn't know what Star Wars was going to be, and then the prequel fights are amazing. The choreography that they got for those, I wish they had kind of kept the prequel level for subsequent shows, because there's a way that you could do it. Ahsoka's a fully trained Jedi. You can argue she has more training than Luke and a lot of other ones. So I
don't think that's an argument. She does have more training than Luke.
She should be at the height of a Jedi, right? And the ones that we saw in Ahsoka, and I just think it's unfortunate. It's Rosario Dawson. I don't think she's just a physical enough actor that she can pull off a lot of the stunts. And I don't know if they got a great stunt woman for those fights. Like I didn't see it on the page, right, or on the screen, I should say. So I wish the fights were better.
I think a part of that is just like, in some ways, you still have to kind of match the original trilogy, so it doesn't fall too far away, and you're just not invested in that original story anymore, and that like the gateway, like, and those become the worst. And I think that is in some ways part of the like game you have to play when that's kind of your entry point, are older films.
Right.
And they also had to work around the Vader suit, which didn't have a lot of mobility. Right. I mean, like in real, like, you know, truthfully, like Luke could have just like walked around 180 degrees, and by the time Vader figured it out, he would have been sliced in half. So, you know, so
right. Yeah.
So, I don't think I liked the fights in Ahsoka, but I know exactly what you're talking about. You can feel it. Maybe that's part of this Filoni. Like, it's not like where he really wanted to be, and they wanted to focus that more here. But anyway, that's the Acolyte. Let's go to this main story, you know, in the Acolyte. So you have these two sisters who are Night Sisters, like kind of confirmed that they're Night Sisters. Someone does say Night Sisters, one of the Jedi, and they're like, they're witches. Like, they don't like
right. They're like a sect or like an offshoot of the Night Sisters. I read an interview with Leslie Headland, the showrunner, and she was saying like the Night Sisters have green magic and smoke, and then these sisters are kind of like purple. So that she wanted to distinguish or there's even the black smoke monster that we see at some point. So yeah, I think they're related, but they're not 100% the same.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we have these girls who are virgins in the Force, which is what they think that, you know, Anakin is. The prophecy, blah, 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 could have been misread, blah, blah, blah. Star Wars don't pay attention to their own Star Wars, you know, so on. And so the whole thing kind of revolves around this, you know, the who is killing these Jedi who like took these girls, and you know from this witch clan. I saw online, I can't remember who said it, and so I can't give credit, but it said this show is basically cops killing a black woman, really, like, right? And then like saying like, oh, this is what's good for the black kids, like, and then decide, you know, it's just fascinating, like, to like from that angle, you know, like these are the peacekeepers and truth and justice and all that stuff, and like Master Soul is like, I'm trying to do the right thing. This is what I think the right thing is, but was it the right thing? And the show was actually really ambiguous about like all of it, because you don't have enough information about what these witches were doing with these kids, and like so. But I just liked that Disney actually like had the guts to be like, let's tell this political story without really talking about it at all. It's just the story, which I really appreciated. Like, it's there if you want to read into it, but if you don't, it's just Jedis and lightsabers.
Yeah, and I wish more people had your take on it, Tim, because unfortunately, in my YouTube channel and in my Instagram and in my TikTok and in my threads, I am bombarded daily with people, just bad actors, bad takes of it's too woke, there's too many women, there's too many lesbians, it makes you gay. Like, I'm getting all of these things. So I'm getting corrupted, and my feed, I'm like, man, I wish I could push those people away and just talk to you guys about this, because we start to hear that over and over again, and it's like, oh, is this what everybody's saying? But it's really this minority, this vocal minority that
it's the same people who leave 1-star reviews. Like, you know, like, calm down, people. If your meal wasn't great, just don't go back. Like, it's fine.
That's right. What's funny to me about that is reviewing the Acolyte week to week, people were coming back and they were like, I don't like this. And they watched every episode, and it's like, why are you still here if you don't like it? And Star Wars Theory is like one of the biggest Star Wars YouTubers. He's got 3 million subscribers. And he was like one of the biggest culprits of this, where it was like he was saying he hated it every week, but then he's coming back every week. And I felt like he had other ulterior motives, right? Like it's the clickbait and the.
I was going to say, for him, it's content. You know, I think that's a little different than your regular person who's just watching every week at home. Like, ugh, I can't. Right.
And it's like, I don't think they dislike it as much as they say they do. But again, I was seeing all these dumb, like, Ki-Adi-Mundi is not that age, and it's because of there was a CD-ROM in 1999 that said his age.
I saw that, yeah.
And
it's hip to be a troll. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
they completely ignore that. In that same CD-ROM, it said he had a purple lightsaber. So that's okay. But the fact that he was born, like, and nobody cares about the age of Ki-Adi-Mundi. That's
it's not
a big.
What's crazy is that, like, one, yes, nobody cares about the age of Ki-Adi-Mundi. Correct. Absolutely. Second, the second is that, like, it's not canon until it's in a show or a movie.
Thank you. That's always been the case, even more so after, like, That's Something from 1999, a piece of, like, very ancillary media from 1999. It's now the Disney era. Like, of course that's not canon anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you remember the Legends outcry?
If
people.
If it ever was.
Right. It probably, like, it ceased to be real. Like, that ceased to be real the very moment that, like Ki-Adi-Mundi, like, had a blue lightsaber.
It ceased to be real the moment that Bob Iger was like, I wonder if we should buy Lucasfilm. Like, before he even pick up a phone to talk to George.
Absolutely.
Already, that was not canon anymore.
But I even think of the Jedi, the PS1 Jedi game where you could play Plo Koon or you could play Mace Windu and whatever else. Mace Windu did not have a purple lightsaber in that game.
Right.
So,
I remember that.
Yeah.
I played that game. I don't remember that.
So all of a sudden, like, account. Like, what do you, like? Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah. It makes no sense because they'll give things a pass where, okay, not everything was created all at once. Like, there's been so many things that have layered onto the story, added onto the story over the years, and even the prequels themselves. How much stuff do we know about Star Wars today because of the prequels? Like, we didn't know that when we were watching the original trilogy. We didn't know
the Emperor didn't have a name, right?
Yeah,
like he was just the Emperor. Like,
it blows my mind that people are up in arms over this stuff, and then they'll say, again, this is my experience, but most of the people that are giving these negative takes, besides it's too woke, which is the number one thing, they'll say, oh, it's just bad writing. That's the number one thing they'll say to me is, they're like, I'm not racist. I have black friends. That part is fine to me. It's just the writing is bad. It's just bad writing. That's the number one.
What's the opposite of the bell that I can ring for I have black friends? What's the opposite? What's the anti-bell?
Yeah. And so there's, like, it just wears down. It wears me down because it's all of this stuff that means nothing to the story. The saying that there's lesbian witches and Disney's alphabet mafia and they're LGBTQ and all this stuff. It's like, what does that have to do with anything about the story? Because then they'll say, when you call them out on that, they'll be like, oh, it's just bad writing and the story doesn't make sense. And then you ask them, well, what part of the story doesn't make sense? And they can't give you an actual engaging conversation.
No, because thematically and symbolically, the story is great. Like,
right.
Yeah.
I got to say, the story is like the last thing I have a problem with.
Right. I 100% agree with you, Frank, about the format, because if you noticed, a lot of the endings of the episodes were like they're so quick, and it felt like there was more to a lot of these, and they just felt like that was where they chose to cut. And if it had been a movie, if it had been 6 episodes, I think Kenobi was like 6 episodes, I want to say. I'd have to look it up, but why did they? I don't understand this 8 episode thing that they're all of a sudden everyone has to do. They could go Andor's like 12 episodes. Like, why do you have to stop at 8? And then, like Frank said, a lot of it sometimes feels like decompression, and they could have compressed it more. They could have cut out some stuff. To me, that was the biggest fault of this show, was the format. Not the story, not the acting. it was the format 100%. That was what I think brought it down a little bit for me.
I think Frank was the one that said to me that it feels like a show that was meant to be binged, and it's not. Like you said that weeks ago, where you said like it's so like if you did watch it in one sitting, those cut endings don't really matter because you're like because they're going to start in 5 seconds. So like you're just like whatever, you're just moving into the next one. But you don't have that option when you're watching week to week, and it did feel strange. Like the cutting places, like they were not natural cuts, and it's one of those things that you take for granted when you're watching TV. Like you're watching like almost a complete little story inside of every episode, even if it's not a one and done. It's a continuing story. Like there's a full arc in every episode, and these episodes didn't have full arcs in each one. You just told like the next few pages of what was one long script.
Right.
I so agree with you, and I want to point, and I haven't heard a lot of people say exactly this, but like Leslie Headland is the brilliant showrunner of Russian Doll. Russian Doll was a Netflix series designed to be binged. Mm-hmm. Like that is her like sweet spot, right? So that is her like comfort zone. That's the kind of storytelling that she like excels at, and I think that, given a somewhat arbitrary mandate that like this is going to be delivered week to week, maybe not the best decisions were made about where to cut this, like what cuts to make in the story so that you can cut it up into 34-minute segments.
I wonder if part of that was also that just like they know that like once it's out and the show is done, it's just bingeable then at that point. So maybe the idea is like you will get over the weird breaks. But if people were to find it afterward, which does happen on streaming services, right? Sure. People don't have to watch week to week; they can come to it whenever they want. They'll maybe like get a better audience on the.
But why even do the like? Oh well, you get over the weird breaks. Why have the weird breaks at all? Why be like, well, you'll get over it? Like what? Yeah. What makes you? What motivates you to have them in the first place?
I think because like you're like the mandatory.
I guess, yeah. I just think the show, the format of the show would have been better dropped all at once. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of the complaints would have been neutralized, and the trolls wouldn't even have space to breathe. Right? We wouldn't have a whole week where we're arguing over, well, how does Keanu say that they've been dead for a millennium if he blah, blah, blah.
Because he was part of the cover up.
He's part of the cover up.
Right,
is the first, like number one, and number two, like who cares? Who cares?
Right. Star Wars is filled with inconsistencies. Go to the Dagobah system. You will train with the Jedi who trained me. LOL. Right. Yeah.
Are you new here?
Yeah. Right.
It blows my mind because they also hold up the Lucas, and again, this is my experience. They hold up the Lucas original trilogies, and we all of us lived through the George Lucas hate on the prequels.
Oh,
we all saw that, and it's so funny to look at it now in 2024. And people are like, oh, the prequels are great. The Disney Star Wars, the sequels are terrible. Everything Disney is bad. And every time I see that on my YouTube, I put Andor, Tales of the Jedi, Visions,
Season 7 of Clone Wars.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Season 7 of the Clone Wars. Like, there's been so much great, the Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order video games we talked about. There's been so much great Disney content. Rogue One. And people say, it's Disney and it's Kathleen Kennedy. Those are the two scapegoats that they always use. And I'm like, why don't you just say, okay, you didn't like this thing, you didn't like this thing, but look, there's this thing that I did like. It's not Disney overall. That would be like trying to blame Warner Brothers for every DC thing you didn't like instead of, okay, I didn't like this script, so I didn't like the writers. I didn't like the way the direction was in this, so I didn't like the directors. It's crazy to me that it's the Disney thing has become the scapegoat for all these trolls.
I think a lot of that is that people consider themselves fans of media, movies, music, TV, whatever, but they have no idea how it works to be in the business, work the job, write the script, direct them. They have no idea what anybody actually does or how they do it. And even if they say, like, no, I know, you don't. Like, you just don't. Because at the end of it, the only people who I would actually take their complaints seriously are people who have done those jobs. And not jobs like, oh, I've made my little films on the side, or I went to film school, or I'm a coffee runner or something. Like, okay, you run a multi-million-dollar company, right. And then you can tell me how she's doing. Because up until then, I don't do that job. I don't know how she's doing or how she's not doing. I just know that I watched a good Star Wars show, and that's truly all I care about. You know, in terms of this conversation. I care about other things, to be clear. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you guys, there was a couple of things, now that the show's done, there are a couple of things that I still have lingering questions in my mind. The first one was the kill with no weapon thing, which that was May's first test, was you have to kill these 4 Jedis with no weapons. I was hoping we would get an explanation about that. It was left ambiguous of why is that the test? What does that prove? And then I felt like ultimately, yes, Osha killed Saul with the Force, and so she killed him without a weapon. So I like where they got the ending of that, but the whole journey of it, I just didn't feel like it was justified of killing without a weapon, because, like I said, what was the point of that? Was my overall. Did you guys have in your head canon? Did you have a reason for that?
I'd say one, just like the ingenuity of having to do it. Like, I'm sorry, if you want this bad enough, then you have to figure out how to do it without the easy access to the obvious thing, right? You know, and so like anybody can accidentally get a good hit with a lightsaber or a blaster or anything like, and so you have to do this the hard way. I think that's just all like Sith boot camp training. That's kind of how I took it.
See, I wish he hadn't given her the poison then, because it was like, wait a minute, you're telling her not to kill with a weapon, and then you're making the poison for her, which ends up killing Torben. And isn't that a weapon? Like I didn't.
I would consider poison a weapon. Yeah, and maybe he's just not good at it. You know, maybe like like maybe the stranger is just bad at being a Sith. Which,
I mean, that's possible. Yeah,
it's possible. I mean, we see Plagueis in the background at the very end, right, inside the cave. So, like, his story ends in tragedy too. It's not a mystery
I want season 2 for that. I want to see Plagueis
for that alone, right?
Yeah, give us his overall plan. I stood up when I was watching that. There's 2 times I stood up in the finale. Was when Plagueis appeared, and then when the kyber crystal started. I was like, she's bleeding it. She's bleeding it.
Yeah.
See, now I'm picturing you sitting next. I picture you watching the show with your wife. Am I correct on that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I picture you like standing up and her being like, "What?"
That is not. That is not. That is accurate. That is accurate to what happened in my situation. And after the episode, I ended up showing her on YouTube like different kyber crystals being bled, and she posted on Instagram. She's like, "Look, my husband's explaining Star Wars to me." But I was telling her the Plagueis stuff, and then the lightsaber, the bleeding, which I love that we got to see it in live action for the first time, because we saw it in the comics and we saw it in the video game, but this was the first live action. And this is what I love about this show. The Greek tragedy of her using Soul's lightsaber, which is the lightsaber that killed her mom, and also having that vision of, she thought it was May who was killing Soul, and it was her. So she's having a vision of herself killing him. Like, those things to me are juicy morsels.
Yeah, I agree. But May is also herself. If they're virgins, are they the same? They're literally the same person.
You've been told they're the same person.
So
that was another question that I had. So maybe you guys can give me your headcanon on this. What was the point of them being, like, the whole marketing thing was they are twins, right? And we had the O's and everything, and all this twin metaphor stuff. If they're the same person, what was the point of the twin stuff? Like,
okay. So, Frank, you had your mouth open. So I
do have thoughts, but I want to hear your thoughts.
I was going for, my personal thought was light side, dark side, like the two sides of the Force, the brother sister thing, like, the Force.
I like that.
Beings, like, it's just like, if they're virgins or whatever, then they're like a full representation of those two sides. and they switch sides, which is another like big symbolic thing about how easy it is to cross from one end to the other one, and is redemption possible, or are you always doomed to walk this path? Like, I think it leaves a lot of questions open, but I think like this season also purposely didn't answer all of them because there's still a story to tell.
Right. Because at that point, why not just make them twins? I want to know, hopefully we get this in the second season. Give me a meaning for them being the same person, being split in half, and now they are two sides of the same coin, but they didn't. I guess they didn't make them distinctive enough.
No, I thought they were doing like a Dark Crystal thing where they were going to like put the crystal shard back and they were going to become like the same person
I
again.
thought they were going to like merge into smoke or something and become one again.
See,
but
I don't know if merging like is the right move because they are like we know them as two different people now, right? Like even if they are technically the same person, like they're different people. Like they have different experiences and different influences and all that. Even with May's memories being erased, like there is still a part of her that is shaped by what happened to her.
Right.
And I feel like it's almost like I think Plagueis when the witches said that like they didn't want the Jedi to know how the girls where they came from, how they were born, all that kind of thing. I think Plagueis must be involved in that. And I think that, or like in showing them how to create life using the Force or the thread.
Yes.
And I think, I think that like, it's almost like this was a failed attempt. Like, it didn't quite work because the light side and the dark side are separate. And the next time he strikes the match, like, he gets Anakin, who is that's the flame. Like that gives you a flame. I feel like that's sort of what's happening here. They're like on the way to, and it reminded me of that episode of Star Trek, the original series, where there's the transporter malfunction and Kirk gets split into like good Kirk and bad Kirk. Yeah, like they kind of reminded me of a much more in-depth, like thoughtful exploration of that kind of idea.
Right. I like that.
And that's what I'm saying. Why don't they just make them twins? Like, what was the point of making them the same person? I think the exploration of them being sisters and they wanted two different things, they are two different people. That would have made more sense.
But if they're the same person, don't you want two different things? So they're a full symbolic representation of yourself, one person wanting two different things, wanting to walk two separate paths, choosing the road not taken and the road more traveled, right? And I think that's what it is. So I think it's not just about them being twins, being fully separate, but also being fully together. Again, I think that like that answer hasn't been revealed. Frank hit on something too, where he said, like he didn't strike the match correctly, creating life. Like this is all a big if this is all a big experiment. But the tragedy of Darth Plagueis, the great monologue from episode 3, he's like, Ruba has it, the Darth Plagueis, blah, blah, blah. He used the Force to create life. And he looks at Anakin, right? Obviously, you're like, hello, it's you. But that doesn't mean that, like, that's the only time he did it, right?
Right.
It has, like...
I love that. I like that.
Yeah, you don't do an experiment once and go, good enough. Like, you think you got to test it out a few times for whatever his purpose is.
The trolls were having a field day with that one, saying, well, this invalidates everything that came before because Anakin was the chosen one. He was the one who was supposed to be created by the Force, the midi-chlorians. And what Tim just said makes perfect sense. They did not succeed. This was not what they wanted, and they are not the chosen one. They are not the same
because
thing that
because that the show leads you to believe that the power of many ritual is supposed to merge them back together or something. Like it doesn't like real. That was like my impression.
I don't know. Here's the thing. Like I feel like what does ascending mean? Like I don't know.
Right. I thought it was
they needed to tell us a little bit more about some things like that.
Yeah,
but
I would have liked to have seen more of the Witch Coven and understanding their
dynamics,
their philosophies and everything. Yeah,
their way of life.
Yeah, that would have given us some more. And I think that's a segment of Star Wars that is mostly unexplored. Like Tim mentioned the Night Sisters earlier. That's really the only magic we get in Star Wars for the most part. And I'd like to see more of that. And Plagueis manipulating them from behind the scenes, or him learning it from them. And then that's where, because he's supposed to be obsessed with trying to live forever and prolong his life, which also, that was another question that I had in my notes. How old is Chimere? Because he says, like, I'm older than you think, or I've been a Jedi for a long time. Like, how old specifically has he been using some type of magic or something to prolong his life?
Well, he's Venestra's Padawan.
Yes.
So
and she's like really old.
She's pretty old because this is 100 years before. This is 100 years before the Phantom Menace,
yes.
And she's 15, 200 years before the Phantom Menace.
Yes.
Because she's 15 when she becomes a Jedi, and she becomes a Jedi in like the first wave of High Republic books.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Which are set 200 years before. So she's 115 here, give or take.
I think that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And so she could be his first. He could be her first Padawan, and if he hooked up with Plagueis, like, and he's all, and maybe because she's obviously like, whoa, you're alive, crazy. So maybe he's an experiment to see how long life can be sustained outwardly, not just from the master, but to the apprentice, and so on and so on and so on and so on from there. So
what if it was like octuplets and then quadruplets and now twins, but then it's going to be one? You know what I mean? Like, what if there are like 8 more chimeras running around?
Yeah,
it's possible. Yeah.
Or the other 7. The other 7 evil X's got finished off, and now he's the last one.
Right. Yeah, there's so many ways that they could go in season 2. I really hope they don't get cut off at season 1, because this is where I was at the end of Ahsoka when that finale aired. I was like, okay, there's so much more story to be told here. This is not a satisfying conclusion. That's why it took us 3 months to get an announcement of the second season of Ahsoka. Then my fears and my anxiety can be kind of alleviated. This one, I'm in the exact same place again. I'm like, what if they don't get a second season?
Yep. Although I do think because it is all the same company that pumps out, comics and books and this, I feel like there's like, all right, well, there's no second season, but we'll continue the story in a different way. Like that's kind of the Disney model. Like, this didn't finish here, but don't worry. Like, we're going to take these bits and wrap it in, because that's like, if Disney does anything, it's synergy, right? Everything touches one bits of the other, the other. So I do think there's going to be a second one. I truly, like, if the Kenobi was supposed to be one and done. It's not like I was waiting on the announcement of a second season. They told the story they wanted to tell, and they left. Like, that's good. That's fine. I don't want further adventures of Obi-Wan Kenobi, because then you really do then start to shift the original trilogy a little too far. Right. Like, then you're really just blatantly ignoring some things. Like, he needs to be a hermit looking after Luke. It's fine. Yeah, his story is done. But if they really did find this, this was the most minutes watched outside of Kenobi in a premiere for Star Wars, there'll be a second one. If I'm not concerned here. And even Leslie Headland said they asked her about the number of the review bombing, and she was like, we don't pay attention to those. Like, I just think, well, like, I'm glad, they know it's not real and it doesn't actually reflect an audience. So
I'm glad they're going off of just like viewership. That's what they should be going off of, not the fake review bombs and the minority of people that are out here screaming about how. I mean, I'm getting it. I got it today. I was looking at my Instagram earlier today, and I posted something, and they were like, "Oh, this show is trash. It's garbage. Worst show that they've ever made." And I'm like, "Did you watch this show? Like, it doesn't. Yeah, it wasn't the perfect show. It wasn't the best thing they've ever made, but for them to say it's the worst and it's the trash and it ruins canon, it ruins all this stuff. It's like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
I agree.
I had one more question that I'm still wondering, and I need your head canon. Basil the Tracker, what was the point of Basil?
Rogue figure.
And him like sabotaging Soul's ship, and then just like he went from drop kicking May to then she was saving her in the next episode. It was like, what here's the point?
The only way I can make any sense of this, and to be clear, I don't think this is the right answer, but it's the only theoretical thing I can think of. The entire, since he was introduced, he's just been sniffing around, right? All he's been doing is sniffing, and running in a different direction because he smells a scent, right? I think him understanding that these two are both alive, right? Because they have two different scents, and he can tell that they're two different people. Although maybe I could be wrong about this because they're one person, but whatever. Two different scents, and he's like, wait. You need both of them alive to prove what you're trying to prove, right? Because Soul says, like, now that I know both of you are alive, like now I can prove to the Jedi. So that's the only like tenuous thread of a link that I can really think of. I feel like we were supposed to understand something there. I really feel like I was supposed to understand something, and that maybe even like, I don't know, like maybe it was very clear to the people making the show, and to us it doesn't translate. Like maybe it even said in the script, like, Basil indicates to Saul that like he must not kill. I don't know. But it just, something felt off. Like either we're missing a scene that we should have had, or some dialogue we should have had, or they thought that they were sort of communicating it subtly, and maybe they needed to hit us with a frying pan. But something about that didn't hit me. That's the best I can do.
Yeah, I could have gone for a frying pan. Actually, I think that's if definitely.
Someone would have said something.
Yeah, because the show does a lot of things unsaid. It is like you talked about, like the lightsaber that killed her mother is the one that she claims and corrupts, because to her it's like in a lot of ways it's already corrupted because it killed her mom, and like that's really good. And even like May's path to kill the other Jedi leads Osha to kill the final one, who is the person who took care of her, but is also the thing. Whereas May is saved and redeemed in a different way, Osha declines, loses all her funding, or whatever. And so, thank you. So I really like that. What my question for you guys is do you like that Soul dies, or should there be redemption for Soul? Because it's not even like he dies. He is tarnished to save the Jedi. Like, he did this, he's rogue, he's bad, he's this, like all this stuff. Is this what this guy deserved? Or should we got some Force healing in there? Like, where's the Force healing? Where is that stupid Force healing? Like,
yeah. I wanted to see him live just because I like Lee Jung-jae as the actor. He did a phenomenal performance. The fact that he does not speak English and had to learn his lines phonetically, like that blows my mind. And the subtleties, the nuance on his face of him slowly cracking and breaking down the second half of the season. Whereas in the first episode, you saw him, he was so sure of himself. He was so confident. He had the weird picture in his wallet of his Padawan, and we were like, why do you still have that? That's a little weird. But everything about
I think
him
I completely missed that. I don't remember that at all.
Oh man, there's a scene at the beginning where Jackie, his Padawan, was like, why do you still have a picture of Osha, your former Padawan? Aren't we not supposed to have attachment and all this stuff? And then he's like, well, if we fail to learn from the past, all this stuff.
I do remember that.
That he was so sure about himself. And then as the season breaks down, it's like, this guy's losing it. His emotions are all over the place. that's what I loved about this show was the examination of, like I said earlier in the podcast, the Jedi as an institution. And then I wish we had gotten more Sith stuff, because Leslie Headland had come out in interviews saying that this show is going to be from the Sith point of view. And I don't think it ever, like, there's Sith stuff in it. And you get the Cortosis helmet and Manny talking about, like, he just wants to be free. He doesn't want people to control him and say how he can use the Force. But we never got like a Sith point of view. To me, I thought it was overpromised and under-delivered.
It might have been like when she was speaking about the show, she might have meant the show in its totality, what she has in her head for the show, and not necessarily not necessarily the season. Because I think like you can't start just from the Sith perspective, because like their way of life is not correct. Like you just like. If you're a decent human being with any kind of morality, you know that like you just can't do whatever you want whenever you feel like it, and like reasons to be darned, right? That's no good. So I think if you started that way, they're like, there's nothing to attach yourself to. There's no tragedy there, and a good Sith has a good tragedy attached to them. Vader, Kylo Ren, little, but like Maul is just Maul, or even Dooku, because of Tales of the Jedi, has a bit of tragedy laced in there, right? And that's like what makes them interesting. And so if they're just evil for evil's sake, like I just want to do whatever I want because I can, I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to watch a show about you,
right?
So
man, but there's so much interesting stuff here. There's so many ideas that they can play around with in the second season and beyond. One of the things I really wanted to get both of your takes on, because the Gospel According to Lucas, a Star Wars Bible study podcast, was so fantastic. I wanted to get your take on David
Harewood, the Martian Manhunter himself.
Senator John Jones.
Senator John Jones, yes.
I wish he had been throughout this whole
Me too.
series.
Me too.
He came in the last episode, and there was a bunch of rumors online. Oh, he's Plagueis, like, because he's a big name and he hadn't shown himself yet. But I love that we got what we got.
A complete dismantling of the Jedi Order in 3 minutes. These are all the things that are wrong with the Jedi Order. Like, and you're like, you're right. Those are exactly all the things that are wrong with the Jedi Order. But this is also the beginning of their decline. That's what's so amazing. Like that conversation is what leads us to the neck, like the arm in arm, like with the Chancellor and the Senate. And I just, I loved it. Right. I loved it so much.
And he said he had 2 moments in the show that I was like, this is the best thing.
Considering he's in like 2 scenes, that's very impressive.
Yeah. I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power, posing as a religion, a delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable. And Vernestra says, we don't control the Force. And he said, not the Force, your emotions. You project an image of goodness and restraint, but it's only a matter of time before one of you snaps. And when, not if that happens, who will be strong enough to stop you? So it's that who watches the Watchmen, like who controls the power of the Jedi. And I love all of that stuff.
Yeah, but wait, can I go on to that for 1 second? Because he's not wrong, because like Anakin does snap. Right. And you can't stop him because he's the most powerful one. But it's because of the checks on the Jedi, because of what he says in the first place, that allows Palpatine to like do what he does with Anakin in the first place. So like the very worry of who watches the Watchmen is the entry point into their decline. So if they were actually just left to their own devices, you probably wouldn't have that issue. Like it might not have even gotten there. Of course, it's a Schrodinger's cat, a Schrodinger's box of, what coulda, woulda, shoulda, what would happen. But like, it's only because this gets set in motion that his greatest fear actually becomes true.
Right.
So, like that's good.
Yeah, it's some really, really good stuff. It is. He's coming in at the beginning of the end, right? Like, and he kind of kicks off a series of events that are going to lead to exactly what he's trying to prevent.
Yeah, So there's irony, tragedy, all this stuff, and you can't tell me that's not good writing. Like
Come on.
There's the overall themes and the things that are in this show are fantastic because I think, and again, Lucas said it in the prequels. Like, I feel like a lot of the trolls that are like this Disney era is bad because Luke Skywalker, he should have been a perfect guy. He should have never had any an ounce of thought that he was going to, take out Kylo Ren. And he's supposed to be this perfect Jedi and all this stuff. That to me is boring. And I love that he changes in The Last Jedi. He's 30 years. He's a different person than he was at the end of Return of the Jedi. This show is along the same lines of you're looking at your heroes. That another Rain Court, John Jones quote, when you're looking up to heroes, you don't have to face what's right in front of you. The hero worship of the Jedi goes not only in the universe, but outside the universe. All of us grew up with the original trilogy and thinking, oh, the Jedi are the greatest thing that's ever happened to the galaxy. And Lucas with the prequels was like, not really. They weren't really the best thing for the galaxy. And here's why. And here's when you have this massive system and this institution, here's how it can break down. So all of that stuff I loved in this show, looking at that. And I don't think the trolls want to change their idea of the Jedi and say that they're not all good. There's no shades of gray.
Right, because the show's not saying that all Jedi are bad.
Yes.
Right.
Like, or even the institution is completely corrupt or bad. It's just saying that it's not perfect because nothing is perfect.
Right.
Including people. Like, and so I agree with you.
It's only a matter of time until a person snaps.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One bad day. Right. Whatever.
Bad day. So, and I just have to call out that I love that is also Lex Luthor's reasoning is that like we're going to put all of our trust in this guy. What if he goes rogue? I got to have a kryptonite ring.
Right.
I love the it is a classic story. It is a classic story of the villain.
It's Julius Caesar.
Yeah, but sure.
This dude cannot be in charge of all of us. That can't happen. So we got, you know what I mean? So we have to dismantle him. Whatever. Yeah. And so, but then history, stories show that when sometimes like you go ahead and do the rash thing, it ends up out, it backfires on you. Right. See the Roman Empire, page 1. This one guy shouldn't have all the power. You're right. Let's kill him. Couple years later, hey, this one guy, he should have all the power. Woo! Mm-hmm. That's what this is. So thunderous applause, blah blah blah.
Right?
Yeah, that's why I say this is all right. This is not controversial. No, it is controversial. This is not the controversial part. People are dumb. That's not controversial. We know that. Not everybody's dumb, obviously. Very smart people.
People are stupid.
Correct. But I think that this is the English teacher part of me. There's a serious decline in the way that people think about their media. And, and they're not taught. People don't read anymore. And they weren't taught to analyze subtext anymore. If a show presents anything remotely where you have to think about it symbolically, a general audience doesn't know how to do that anymore because they're too busy also looking at their phone, and they've had years of not putting in the work to think that way. And so you can say anything you want about the show, like it was kind of edited weird or cut in weird points, but honestly, it was too smart for a general audience. And I say that fully saying this is not it's not the smartest show I've ever seen. It's well written. I thought it was well written and all that stuff, but it's not like, it's not like I'm like walking away going, well, it probably should win the Pulitzer Prize because it's probably it's the greatest thing since The Great Gatsby. But people just don't think about their TV like that.
I agree with everything you just said. And at the same time, I hold this other thought in my head, which is maybe this is not the right venue for something that insightful, thoughtful, meaningful when it's so mass market.
Mm-hmm. Nope. To quote George, it's for kids. Like Star Wars is for kids.
But, even let's say it's not even just for kids. Even if it's for all ages, maybe it needs to have broader appeal in a certain way. And there's certain things like what was the smoke monster thing? What was the why were she and May both turning into smoke? Why were
it was a Lost reference? I don't know.
Yeah, right. Like that's all I can think of is a Lost reference. Like it's just there were little things like that sort of felt like why. There, I needed you to tell me what was happening. There, I needed you to tell me a line of dialogue, a line of ADR dialogue would have helped.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those. So I all that to say, I think you're absolutely right that it was like too smart for a lot of people, and they were reacting poorly to something that maybe they weren't looking at closely enough because we're not taught the critical thinking skills like we used to be. But also, the show could have helped us along a little more.
For sure.
Yeah. That scene was like, I understood the goal of that scene, but the way that it was shot was clunky, and it didn't make it seem like he was reacting on instinct, and it just didn't. Like I said, I knew what they were going for, but the execution of it was just muddy. I wish they would have been more clear on that. I'm with Frank. That scene, and that's supposed to be like really almost the key to the whole show and the mystery of what happened on Brendock. And there's actually two parts to that. Number one, what Saul did. Number two, what Torben did. And his motivation, his entire motivation being he was homesick. I wish they had filled that in a little bit more.
Lame.
We didn't know him. We didn't know Torben, and that could have been further explored, or that could have been explained, because we have no background and history of him. So, I wish that.
I do agree that the episode, they're like, this is the truth of what happened. When it was done, I was like, so that was worth taking a vow of silence for?
Right.
Like, and I'm like, I understand, like, a lot of people died and everything and, like, all this stuff, but I'm also like, yeah, like, I need more. Like, yeah, it just, like, wasn't enough. Like, I don't know. I'm not, like, I think part of it is that, like, people make, I'm very much in the line, like, people make mistakes. It's not like they ran in there and just slaughtered everybody and they were like, we shall never speak of this. Like,
right.
They didn't really start it. And so they kind of went in and reacted to what was happening, even if they didn't work as a cohesive unit. So it didn't totally work for me that they take all the blame. Like, and I think also maybe that's part of the point of the show is that, like, people that sit there acting on complete vengeance for something that, like, was a little outside of the Jedi's control already.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I'll go ahead, Frank.
Please.
They should have, they just should have spent more time with those characters. The 4 Jedi that after the Brendock incident, this is another thing, Frank. Do you think it would have been better to do it chronologically instead of having this mystery and doing the flashbacks? If we had told it chronologically, we would have had the characters reacting more to their decisions and what they did, rather than we as the audience are kind of behind. We don't know what happened on Brendock. And so we're like trying to catch up to them. And then by the time we catch up, the show's over. Do you think it would have been better in a chronological format? Or did you like it the way it is?
I think that here's what I think. I think that we should have gone closer to chronological. Even if we started where we started, let's say we started where this show started, and sprinkled flashbacks throughout rather than having entire episodes devoted to them.
Right. Right.
I think that might have helped a lot. But you know what? If you did do it completely chronologically, like you suggest, I do think that there might have been more emotional weight to some things that we didn't really get the full impact of sort of because of the way the story was unfolded before us. And again, I feel like the timing of the way things were unfolded was a little bit contrived. And like, yeah, anything's a mystery if you don't tell me what's going on. Right. Like,
true.
You know what I mean? Like, sure, anything can be a mystery if you decide to stop it 5 seconds before I find out the answer to a question. But like, it just doesn't. There wasn't enough there to sort of give me the emotional weight of like why this is mysterious and why this matters. I also, if I can, just want to circle back to something that we were just saying. Like, I think that yes, they wanted to show the Jedi as like not perfect. Yeah, but also they wanted to show is that the Sith as not all bad, as like having understandable motives.
Yes. Right.
And it sort of nets out where it's like, it's all kind of gray. Maybe one's a darker gray than the other, but they're all kind of gray to the point where when Osha is killing Saul, she's no longer wearing white, but she's not wearing black. She's wearing gray. Mm-hmm. Like she's wearing gray, not like Luke, who was wearing black in Return of the Jedi, right? With like, and then like the white flap opens up, so it's like, oh, he turned back to the light side. But like, she's just wearing gray. Like, to me, that's a meaningful choice, and to me, that's like, she is, Osha when she is turned is still sort of a gray. She makes the kyber crystal bleed. Yes, like that's using the dark side, but there is like a sort of wrong thing for the right reasons thing going on there with her.
So what you're saying is the costumes were good.
They were.
I'm not saying they're not.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing about the Jedi and the Sith being two sides of the same coin, because the Sith came from the Jedi. It wasn't like they were the Hatfields and the McCoys existed for all of time. It was like, okay, there were a couple of dark Jedi that branched off and they turned into Sith, and then that became the lineage. So I like that examination of the Sith are not that different really from the Jedi, and there's things that they both share in common. Soul and Chimere kind of mirror that the opposite sides, and then all the yin yang symbol that we see in the show. Like there's a bunch of symbolism to these are the mixture that you have to have, because there is no darkness without light. There is no light without darkness. Like the two things have to have each other in order to define the other. You have to have the different ones. So I like that. All of that stuff is interesting to me, and showing, I think in the second half of the season, you're meant to look at Chimere and be like, oh, maybe he's not so bad. I think there was a lot of seduction and him being naked, and like the seduction of Osha, I think is you're supposed to feel, hey, wait a minute. If I was Osha, I might go with him too. And then for Soul, you're supposed to, I think the way that the show is structured, you're supposed to think that he unravels and he wasn't as good as we thought he was because he killed the mother. And the juxtaposition of, oh, I thought the light side guy was good and I thought the dark side guy was bad. He's the one with the red lightsaber, right? So he's the bad guy. But wait a minute, he's making a lot of good points about the Jedi and all these things. And same thing with Harcourt, or Ravencourt. Sorry, I put the actor's name with the character's name. But yeah, you're supposed to kind of question these things, and that's what I like about this show is you're not getting that in a lot of these other shows that we're seeing. Maybe Andor, but I just really liked all of the. You're supposed to examine it a little bit deeper than you have before.
It actually goes back to, like, this is funny, maybe this is where her head's at. So in the 90s, this is my English part of me again, the big literary criticism push was the question. You have to question everything. And so in doing so, you dissect all of it, and you're supposed to rebuild it back up together again to form a cohesive answer. And that actual building up kind of got lost, and so people just end up questioning everything. But when you question everything, there's no hard answer. There's nothing concrete to actually fall on. So then there's just the age of ambiguity, and thus that's where everybody's opinions matters, but then everybody's right. But that can't be. So because there's like there's too much going on. You have to find some kind of solid ground. But this is where the show, it kind of lands its idea. But this is also where the Sith land their idea, right? They question the concreteness of the system, the galactic system, the way life works. And I'm not going to do that. Why? Because I don't want to. And I just like, but so like on its surface, like, we say that like both the Jedi and the Sith here are in shades of gray, but I think it's only if you like take what the Sith are saying and what the Jedi are saying at face value, instead of diving into like what they actually believe, instead of what they're doing. It's almost like it's like the American government. Like, we believe in this, like, but this is what's happening. Or any government. I shouldn't even say the American government, but like, we believe in democracy, but this is the kind of stuff that's happening. It doesn't mean that democracy is bad. It just means that you got to work on it. So I just like that the show is doing that, but I think like Osha is getting tricked by not actually asking the question of why, and the show is demanding that the audience ask why, but not the main character is like not doing it properly, which is why she ends up getting sucked into it. It's sucked into the Sith.
Yeah, I think all that is just fascinating, like I said, and that's what, at the end of the day, when I finished watching the show, besides the martial arts, the wire work, seeing all of those things, getting to see a lot of these High Republic elements, and also looking at the institution of the Jedi and the Sith and how those are related, and then how they're not everything that we thought they were. I think going into it, I think that's all ultimately the takeaway that I get from the show is, like Tim was just saying, question everything, and you should. This is why the Jedi fell, and this is just a fascinating time period to look at and look into. So yeah, I really enjoyed season 1, and I hope they get a season 2, because I feel like Leslie Headland and all the writers and directors that they have something to say, and they're not done yet. The things that they have to say are still, like, there's still stuff left in the tank.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it was a really good story told in an unusual format, or a format that wasn't suited to the story. And for all we know, like, maybe that was because of mandates from above or whatever. Like, who knows? But I feel like it was a good story, and that is getting buried, unfortunately, in a lot of like online conversation. But at least it's good to know that people are watching. Like, a lot of people are watching, and hopefully they're not all influenced by that negativity. And hopefully that convinces Disney to give it a second season, if they haven't already internally decided. For all we know, they've already decided, right? But it hasn't been announced,
right?
And I hope it is. I hope it is announced. It would. I think there's a lot of really good story to be told if only they get another season.
Yeah.
I will say that I think one of the downsides of it killing most of its cast in the first season is that I found a lot of the people who died, the characters that I was most interested in.
Oh.
And so, like, no offense, I know it's like supposed to kind of be Osha and May that I'm in, but like I found Soul more interesting than Osha. And so and the witches and whatever else. So now that like they're all dead, and I'm kind of like, well, who do I? It's almost like the Game of Thrones issue where you're like, well, all the people I liked are dead, so who do I root for now? Like, and because I'm not rooting for Osha, I'm sad for her. Maybe I'm rooting that she'll not be a Sith, but I don't think it's going to go in that direction. So it's
right.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's my only like real downside. Like, when you kill most of the cast that like inhabited season 1, you're like, okay, well, now it's going to feel like you're starting fresh all over again, and I don't love that.
Right.
But again, like I said, the show's quite good. It's not great, But I think it stimulated more dialogue than most of the Star Wars shows that have been out there. I like The Mandalorian. I like Ahsoka. I liked Andor. I like them all. But Boba Fett was there. But they're having we haven't been able to have a conversation about Star Wars like this since, I'm going to say it, The Last Jedi. And I appreciate that they're like taking a risk here. So
yes,
it had better work. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, Vactor, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us on a very, very long episode of Beer with Geeks. But I don't even care because it was a great conversation. It's just what Frank and I needed. So thank you so much for coming on. If people want to listen to your thoughts about all things geek, not just Star Wars, but also Star Wars, where can they find you?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm always excited when you guys invite me on. I love your show as I send you text messages and screenshots every time I'm listening to the episodes. But if you want to find more of my ramblings, you can just search at Vactorverse across social media. I do a Star Wars show at Trust in the Force, and I do a comic book show at This Comic Cooks, where we just talked about the finale and the whole season of My Adventures with Superman, Season 2, Beer with Geeks, Animation Fascination. Everybody join me over there, over at This Comic Cooks.
Very good. And Frank, where can people find us?
When we're not appearing over on the Vactorverse, you can find us at beerwithgeeks.com. You can rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, follow wherever you get your podcasts, and you can email us at beerwithgeeks@gmail.com. And of course, if you want to kick a couple of bucks this way so we can pay for server costs and stuff, the place for that is patreon.com/thoughtbubbleaudio.
Well, gentlemen, it was an absolute pleasure to talk Star Wars with you again. What is the next Star Wars thing that's coming out?
Skeleton Key.
Skeleton
Crew.
Oh, Star Wars does Stephen King. That's good. Yeah, that's great.
There's also a Lego Star Wars, which is going to have Darth Jar Jar in it.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Coming out.
Oh, my gosh.
That'll be fun.
That'll be very fun. All right, well, very good. I guess Skeleton Crew is the next thing. Vactor, of course, welcome to come back. I'll take Jude Law in the Star Wars universe. I'll watch just for that. So until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.